why don't we just start out by you just kind of talking, introduce what we're doing, and just kind of create the context, and then start asking the question.
George, what is our purpose?
You know, I don't know what our purpose is. Let me change the pronoun from our to my purpose. I'm to the point in my life that I no longer tend to think in universal generic terms. You know, the majority of people, I don't know what our purpose is in life. I only know what my purpose is, and it's taken me 87 years to begin to get a handle on that. So if you were to ask me, what is my purpose in life? It seems to me at the age of 87 that my purpose in life is to grow in love and compassion toward other human beings. That sounds kind of amorphous and kind of universalistic, but I don't think it is. I used to think that my purpose in life was to become a physician, and then my purpose in life was to become a good physician, or my purpose in life was to become a good husband, or my purpose in life was to become a good Christian. But the older I've grown, the more all of that has kind of fallen away and simplified for me to the point that I really think that my purpose in life is not to do, but to be. I've spent most of my life doing. And that's good. I think there's a time in life you've got to do. That's essential. But I'm at a time in life now where I see that it's more important for me to be a certain kind of individual, and that kind of individual for me is to be an individual who loves other human beings and has compassion. Now that's tricky. Let me tell you what I mean by love, particularly what I don't mean by love. What I don't mean, I do not equate love with liking. I don't equate love in this sense of the word with a particular feeling. I can, there are some people, you can't like everyone. I used to think I was supposed to. That didn't work. There were some people I meet in life that where the chemistry, for whatever reason, is simply not there, and I can maybe work with them, but I don't particularly like them. I think that's true for everyone. Okay, so I don't think I'm called to like everyone, nor do I think I'm called to have strong emotional feelings toward everyone. The Greek word for love has really helped me in a way that English doesn't. We have only one word for love in English. But in Greek, there are at least 3, if not 4 different words for love. Love in terms of stergos, which is the love that a father has for his children. The phileo, which is the love of friendship, where we get Philadelphia. Then there's eros, which is romantic love. And then there's the Greek agape, A-G-A-P-E, which is love, which is not a feeling, but it's an attitude of mind which says, I want the very best for you, whether you like me or not, whether you can respond to me or not. I still, all my negative feelings, whatever notwithstanding, I still choose by virtue of volition to want the very best for you. And I'm at this ripe age, I'm growing into an awareness of how important that is. So when I say I believe my purpose in life is to love, I mean it in the sense of to accept people as they are, where they are, and who they are, not to try to make them over into my image, not to try to convert them, not to try to persuade them to be other than that they are, which is a hard task. But most of my life, I think I have spent trying to either convert people or persuade them that I'm right and they're wrong, or whatever. I think that's not what love is all about. About compassion, for me, compassion is compassio, to suffer with, Latin. And that's, for me, not sympathy. Sympathy is not the same thing as empathy. I think that it's really absolutely imperative that I do the best that I can to try to understand where the other person's coming from, to put myself in his shoes. One of the mistakes that I've made, that I've had to come to grips with, is my failing to understand and appreciate the reasons why people do what they do. Not all reasons are valid, but I need to understand those reasons before making a judgment. And I think that's a form of compassion, to really understand where the person is coming from. I really believe that most people have heavy burdens to bear. We get up in the morning, we put our clothes on, we put our smile on, and we go and do what we have to do. So I may be smiling on the outside, but I'm crying on the inside. And I don't think I'm different from anyone else. And I think in terms of compassion, how I'm visualizing compassion is the ability to stop before I make a judgment, which I'm prone to make judgments, but to stop before I make a judgment and try to understand, when possible, what is he or she going through? Why are they responding to me that way? Because my natural tendency is, you say something nasty to me, I'll pay it back in kind. That's, I think, in our DNA. That's who we are as people. And I think learning to be compassionate means, before I say something, to try to understand and be in the other person's shoes, to understand their pain. Much of the time, I've discovered in my own experience that when someone says something discourteous or unnatural or angry or edgy with me, much of the time, if I'll take the time to kind of understand where they're coming from, they don't really mean it the way I'm taking it, so the message sent is not the message received. It comes across as they're angry, and I receive it as anger, and I respond in kind as anger. And I'm learning that that's wrong. I have to learn, and I am learning slowly, to not respond in anger when someone gives me anger. And so that's a part of compassion. So I think the goal of my life is to learn to grow, and it is a growth, it's a journey. To grow, and the thing that I've learned is that this business of growth is slow. I want things immediately. Like, Lord, I want your will, tell it what it is, tell me what it is right now. And that's not how the way life works. So learning to love and learning to be compassionate is a slow growth process that takes years, probably a lifetime. And so I'm on that journey, but I'm beginning to see that is what my purpose is in life. Now, it seems to me, I think I've realized that I don't have the natural equipment to make that happen. I think I do, but I don't. My natural equipment, my natural DNA is a tick for tat, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. That is just the way it is. I think one reason why we have violence in the world is because violence is a mysterious part of the human fabric. And I'm no different than anyone else. If you push me too far, I'll lash out, I'll bare my teeth. And if you push me too far, I'll strike back. And it's kind of involuntary. So the question is, how can I change that almost involuntary response to difficult situations. You're my friend, so I'll never be violent with you. But if you weren't my friend, if I didn't like you, if I didn't love you as a human being, and you hurt me, I would come to a real challenge and a struggle, because I would come into conflict with my own desire to reach out and respond to you in kind. So I have learned for me that I need something, a counter methodology. I need something to help me temper, change, attenuate my natural response, to teach me gentleness when I want to respond with hardness. For me, religion has been the way I have found that. Now, by religion, I do not mean a particular theology. I'm not talking about Christianity versus Judaism, or Judaism versus Islam, or Islam versus Buddhism. I'm talking about religion in general, and I really believe that every single one of the religions basically says this. Basically says, Christianity says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. 1,000 years before, Buddha said, don't do unto others you would not have them do unto you. Okay? So I think every major religion basically is directed toward teaching us how to become kind, gentle, loving, patient, and long-suffering. And however one categorizes that, however one experiences that, I think is not as important as one gives himself to whatever, to the basic core challenges and dictums of what that particular religion happens to be teaching. So I don't believe for a minute that Christianity is the only way to become loving and compassionate. There are too many other examples of men and women in the world from other faith traditions who have been infinitely more loving and compassionate than I've been. So I don't make a brief for that, but I do believe that left to my own devices, just nice guy George Sims, good doctor, nice guy, bright, that's nice, that's good, okay, but it's good, but it's insufficient. I've come to realize that I need some other way of teaching me how to become truly loving and truly compassionate. And I've found that religion, in whatever way one expresses religion, not just an intellectual belief, but a true giving oneself over to the tenets of that religion, is a way to do this. And I found it very helpful in my life.
When you speak about what your purpose is there a why to why that is your purpose? Why to be compassionate to all these people? Why to see their point of view and really spend time? It seems like a very big investment in people to spend on them. Why? Where does that come from?
Yeah. Nietzsche once said, if one has a why, one therefore can have a therefore. By that he meant, if you have a reason for doing it, which is what you're asking, then you'll find a way to do it. So I think, you've asked a really core question. To be loving and compassionate demands energy. There's no question about that at all. I can save energy and just go on my own way. It'd be much easier for me than to have to worry about someone whom I'm not necessarily drawn to. So then, why are you doing it? That's what you're asking. So, why am I doing it? I think I'm doing it because in my religious orientation, I want to please God. I really believe that I've given my life over to God, and that God has asked me to live my life in a certain way. And one of the ways that He's asked me to live my life is to learn how to become loving and compassionate. So the reason I want to be loving and compassionate is because A, I really want to be loving and compassionate toward these human beings, and B, basically at the root of it, I believe that being loving and compassionate is what God wants me to do. I believe that God wants me to become a fully orbed human being. And it seems to me that part of being a fully orbed human being is to learn how to be loving and compassionate toward other human beings. Absent that, I'm somehow not quite human. I think there's something about the question that I think you're alluding to. What does it mean to be fully human? And I think there are probably different aspects of that. I think one aspect of it is to find a way to help your next door neighbor. Hence, we need to go to school, get an education, find a career, and gain skill to make a contribution to society at large. That, I think, is a moral obligation. Absent that, I'm nothing but a parasite. So, I am a member of a community, whatever that community is, and I have obligations to the community. So that seems to me to be clear. The other aspect of it is I have an obligation to fulfill my destiny as a human being. It seems to me that unless a man has a sense of destiny, he comes to the very sad conclusion that I'm here for a moment in time. I have a little bit of schooling, I get married, I raise a family, I do my little things, and then, like a firefly, my life is over. That strikes me to be a kind of fatalistic, nihilistic, impoverished point of view. If I have no real purpose or overarching reason why I'm here, then why am I here? Now, that's a complicated thing. I realize that. I don't know why children are born with congenital anomalies. I do not know why people die young. I do not know why people die for seemingly random. That's beyond me. I don't have a theory or a system that explains all the apparent randomness of life. But it strikes me that for me, I want to live life in its fullest, and but for me, living life in its fullest is more than just enjoying life. It's enjoying life and becoming a certain kind of human being that has made life noble and easier for my next door neighbor. In order to do that, I have to find a way to meet my neighbor halfway. Maybe that's one way of saying it. It's not sufficient for me to live here and my neighbor live there and we go down parallel tracks. That is less than human for me. In some way, I have to find a way to join my neighbor in a sense of community, whatever that means. It's very clear that I can't go through life not caring about my next door neighbor. I realize that complicates life. But nonetheless, it seems to me my self-definition of being a human being is to care about my neighbor, not solve his problem, but just to be concerned about him. And until I include my neighbor in my world, I'm, in my view, less than a full human. So the purpose for me of life is to become a true human being, and the only way I know how to do that is to learn how to accept him as much as I accept myself, to love him as much as I love myself, and to be as compassionate to him as I am to myself. And I think basically that's That's what religion can help us do. Not in some algorithmic A to B, to say like A equals B, B equals C, therefore A equals C. Not in that kind of algorithmic logic, but in some kind of mysterious way of living life in a sense of community. And that's really what I want to do. And the more I live in community with my neighbor, in a metaphorical sense, I think the more humane I become. And I think my main task is to find ways of being human and humane and making a contribution to the community at large.
And what does that contribution give you?
It gives me both joy and sorrow. I do not believe, I'm old enough now to have realized that life is a strange, mysterious admixture of joy and sorrow. Life is not all joy. That's what we kind of teach our kids when they're young, until they realize there's no Santa, and until they realize that their peers at school taunt them and treat them bad, until they realize that dad is not perfect, So you realize that the world is not perfect and that it's not all joy. On the other hand, I do not believe that life is all sorrow. I know the world has lots of people who have been wounded deeply. I know lots of men and women who have never been in meaningful relationships in their life. They go from one heartbreak to another, one misery to another. And so many people live bitter, painful lives. But to allow the sorrows of life to so consume you is to seal oneself off from the possibility of joys in life too. So for me, life is bittersweet. Bitter because of the sorrows, sweet because of the joys. So reaching out to my neighbor brings me both joy and sorrow. It brings me joy to the extent that I really believe that when I reach out to my neighbor in whatever way, I'm fulfilling in part my own destiny. I am not an island unto itself. I am called to live in communion with my fellow human beings in whatever way. And so I feel a sense of fulfillment when I try to do that. But I also recognize that the price of that, everything has a price, right? The price of that is that I'm going to get kicked in the shins. Because it's like we all learn when we get married. Marriage, there are no guarantees. Marriage is a risk. You may get hurt. You probably will get hurt somewhere along the line. And then when one gets hurt, one has to decide, what am I going to do with that, right? So I think sorrow is inevitable. I do not think it's the dominant theme in life, but I think it's part of this mysterious equation, this algorithm that we're in, whereby time, our physical well-being, finances, the culture that we're run into, the time in which we live, the community that we're born into, the genes that we have, all that plays into this mystery of community. So I know that if I reach out to you in love and compassion for very long, the chances are going to be that you're going to hurt me. Maybe not knowingly, maybe not willingly, but somewhere along the line you're going to say something or do something that's going to hurt me, and I'm going to have to decide what I'm going to do with that. I can pull out and pick up my marbles and go home, or I can find a way to get back at you, or I can try to find out how we can mend the fences in order to maintain the relationship so that we can continue to go together. And that takes a lot of work on us. So I really believe that love and compassion is very costly. But I just believe that that's what I as a human being am called to do, not in some kind of heroic way, but in a very humane way. And it doesn't always have a happy ending. I think there are relationships where you try and it just doesn't work out. There are some marriage relationships where it just doesn't work out for a host of reasons, but they're good people. But for whatever reasons, in the complexity and the mystery of it all, they meant well, but it just didn't work out. So I recognize that my reaching out to my neighbor, that may work out and it may not work out. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And I can't spend my life banging on a wall trying to turn it into a door.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a time to keep trying, and there's a time to lay down your tools and move on. I think it takes a lot of wisdom and insight to be able to know when to pull the plug and not.
Mm.
So I recognize, and I've made my share of mistakes in that. One of the mistakes that I have on my list is that there was a time when I took everything personally. And if you take everything personally, if you say something to me that really upsets me or touches a tender spot, I take it personally and then I swallow it and I think about it. I think about it too long and it turns to resentment. And the resentment feeds on itself. And I may not say it to you, but the resentment is there. And if you're smart, sooner or later you're going to figure it out. So, I recognize that I think the key, one key to this, Ted, is maybe in order to know how and when and why to reach out to another person, maybe the first requirement is the Socratic dictum, know thyself.
Mm.
I've reached out to people any number of times for the wrong reason. I wanted their approval, or I wanted to, I got myself in some kind of emotional one-upmanship. I wanted to show them that I was nicer than they are, smoother than they are, smarter than they are, and I used my charm and my intellect as reaching out to them, but it was with kind of a conscious or unconscious hidden agenda. So I've reached out to people, I think many times, for the wrong reason. Reach out to them because I feel sorry for them, I feel sorry for you. With a sense of noblesse oblige. Noblesse oblige has its place, but it can, for many people, become a way of, I'm here and you're there, and I'm going to throw you a few crumbs, be nice to you, and I'm going to reach out to you. But it's always on the hidden agenda is I'm here and you're there, which is not the same thing as I'm here and you're here, and I reach out to you, and the equality is that you are really me, absent a few details. But if I say, no, you're not really me, I'm smarter, or I have better education, or more money, or whatever, but I'm going to be nice to you. So I've done that a few times. I understand that. So I think knowing oneself and understand, why do I really want to be nice to my neighbor? That takes a lot of painful insight that I think we come too slow. But I think that may be a key in love and compassion. I think a lot of love and compassion is warped because we haven't figured out why we're doing what we're doing, which is, you would ask, why are you doing that?
Your subconscious wanted the kind of one-upsman, like an ego one-upsmanship on that person.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying it's human, and it can be bad. And I think we really need to be in touch with our dark side. There's a dark side to each of us. The dark side is not necessarily bad, but if it's not recognized, it can do bad things. Some of the most talented people that I know, intellectually, professionally, spiritually, whatever, they're enormously talented people, are really out of touch with their dark side. And they don't realize how their gift can become a form of manipulation. And so you can play games with people's heads. But they are enormously gifted, and they make major contributions. But they have a dark side of their personality, so that they use people. I recently read an interesting book by a chap who said his motto for life is 7 words: use things, love people, and worship the divine. Now he's not a religious guy. As a matter of fact, he teaches in the Kennedy School of Business at Harvard. His name is Arthur Brooks, and I think that's a very good motto, because, as he points out, what we tend to do in our society, we tend to love things and use people. And he's saying that's wrong. Use things, and that's very healthy. Being a religious person is not about drawing back from things. I think that's a big mistake. I think the truly religious person is deeply engaged in the world, does not draw back from the world. My job is to be fully engaged with the world, not to convert the world, but to be one with the world in order to love the world. If I draw back from you, I can't love you. I love you by remote control. That's not loving. I can Zoom with you metaphorically for the rest of my life. That's not loving. So I think it's right to use things, but to love people and to worship the divine, however one defines the divine. And I think that's quite good. Those 7 words, I think, are a lovely motto or capstone for what I think is a truly religious point of view of life. And I think loving people and using things is a good way to go through life. But I think in order to use things rightly, in order to love things rightly, I have to know myself. Why am I using these things? My problem is I can use things ad infinitum. You know, the only difference between a child and adult is the size and the price of his toys, right? So I can begin worship things, and that gets into idol worship. And I've learned you can worship not just toys, you can worship other things like your education, like your intellect, like your success. And so I think using is one thing, worshiping them is another thing. So I think it takes a lot of insight to ask myself, it's okay to use things, but why am I using these things? I think we are to use things to enjoy them, but not to turn them into an idol. And I've done that so much of my life. There's no question about that. I own that.
What's an example?
My career. I wanted to be a physician. I became a physician. But becoming and being a physician became the single most important thing in my life. The single most important. All rhetoric notwithstanding. And I thought that was noble and laudable. I think the one reason I thought that was because all my professors said the same thing. They taught me that. They spent all their time in the hospital and little time with their wives and their children. And that became the noble thing to do. Now, I don't want to criticize them. I sat under wonderful, world-famous teachers, and I honor them and I'm thankful for them. But I swallowed their form of life and took it as mine. And their definition of the good life became my definition of the good life. And it took me years and a lot of pain and suffering in my own marriage and other relationships to wean myself off of the fact that being a doctor is good, but that's not what life is about. Life is really about something else. Being a doctor is a wonderful way to make a contribution. And it's a great contribution, but that's all that is. It's no more of a contribution than being a good plumber. It's no more of a contribution than being a good cook. It's no more of a contribution than being a filmmaker. We all make our contributions, but that's what they are. They're contributions, and God gives us the talent to do that. But the talent is the talent, and when the talent becomes life, then we get messed up. And so I think that one of the mistakes I made, was that I became kind of an idol worshiper, and I have gracefully outgrown that, in the process of outgrowing that. So I've changed my goals, and I'm grateful for the gift of having been a physician, but I'm grateful that I see that being a doctor is nothing more or less than any other talent. See, I used to think that being a doctor was more important than anything else because I saved lives. That's hubris. Being a doctor is not more important than being a plumber when your toilet's stopped up. Being a doctor is not more important than knowing how to do a particular task in life. I'm not good with my hands. I wouldn't even know how to build a house. But I need a house to live in, and I'm totally void of those talents. But when I see men and women who are architects, who are construction workers, who are land developers, they have talents that make civilization possible. So yes, being a doctor is one part of the necessity of civilization, but it is not the most important part. No one is more important than the other. It depends upon the situation. So I've had to just learn how to outgrow this kind of hidden disdain that I've had of feeling that what I'm doing in life is a little more important than what you're doing in life. By any other name, it's called arrogance.
Why do you think that arrogance was there so much that now you have spent so much time removing it, and you're very happy about that it's been removed, or is removed as much as possible? But why was it there to begin with?
I don't know for sure. I have a couple of suspicions. One is that I was raised in a family where being a doctor was very important. My maternal grandfather was a well-known physician. I never knew him. He died before I was born. And my paternal family were very accomplished people. So I grew up in a family, and my education, I went to an elite military school in Los Angeles, and so my entire educational and social environment was, it was assumed you were going to go to college. It was assumed that you were going to become a success. So the only thing that was worth discussing was, where were you going to go to college? You're going to go to Caltech or MIT or Harvard or USC or UCLA. That was the only thing that we're going to discuss. So I'm a product of that culture. It's a very cultural kind of thing. So my mother and my father made great sacrifices for me. Great sacrifices. I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for my mother and my father. I shall die in that gratitude and awareness. So it was assumed that I would make something of myself. And so when you have that kind of support, that kind of network, and that kind of encouragement, then the path is set. And this is why it breaks my heart to see people who do not have the privilege of having been raised in an environment like that. A kid who doesn't have a father who is a good role model is a kid who's been handicapped from day one. And so a daughter who doesn't have a mother to really show her what it's like to be feminine and motherly is, where is she going to learn it? And if she doesn't have other role models, she doesn't learn it. So I think part of my answer to your question is, where did I learn it? I think the idea to compete came through my environment. The assumption that I was going to make something of myself came from my environment. The tools to do it came from my genes, I guess. I was born with a certain amount of intelligence and a certain desire to find a way to make that intelligence work. So I think it's kind of a multifactorial.
Was this arrogance just one of the many examples of something that you talked about a few minutes ago, a dark side that everybody has?
The dark side, from a Jungian perspective, is that part of oneself which is not necessarily socially appropriate. Anger, I think, is a good example. If you're raised in a family where you were exposed to a lot of anger, and you have a lot of anger that you've learned in yourself from what you saw at home, and now you're unleashed in society, and the unspoken and partly spoken ground rule is you will act nice and polite, and you will not act out your anger. Then you have to figure out a way how to deal with that anger, and the commonest way is just to kind of suppress it, and eventually gets repressed. So it goes from conscious but kind of hidden, it goes from conscious, dimly hidden, into kind of repressed, where it's really down in the dark netherland, and so that becomes part of our dark side. Well, so how does one deal with anger? I think the one deals with anger is not to say I shouldn't be angry. Some of the nicest people I know really struggle with anger. And part of their niceness is an understandable compensation for what they've had to learn. It's like you're supposed to smile all the time, so you smile all the time. But your smiling is a partly learned phenomenon. It doesn't make you a phony. It may be the only way that you've learned to survive in the environment that you're in. If you want to make it in that environment, and the environment says, "Thou shalt smile," then you smile. Even though you don't believe it, you smile it, and someone say, "That's a little bit phony," and they think, "Well, you're a bad guy." But you may not be a bad guy at all. It may be a culturally conditioned rule of the road that you've had to learn. So the issue is not why are you smiling or not smiling. The issue is there anything behind the smile? And it takes great courage and patience and helpers to sit down and help an individual understand what are his compensatory mechanisms and what's behind that. Quite often, the guy's not a phony, he's not a fake, he's a very real person, but he's had to adopt a certain behavior in order to make it in that environment, but he's making it at a very high price. And the high price is he's not come to grips with his dark side. Now, the anger is not dark. The anger is not bad. We call it dark, but the anger by itself is not bad. We all have anger. The question is anger a chronic way of dealing with life? That becomes very destructive. And so the issue then becomes, how can I get in touch with my dark anger is just an example of it. How can I get in touch with that? If I don't get in touch with that, and if I don't have the courage to let it come up, and to say, yeah, that's who I am, and not place a judgment on it, but say, yes, I am angry, and to, with the help of other people, to explore why I am so angry without saying it's bad. Without that, I will be angry all the rest of my life.
And that anger for the rest of your life will almost be like a black hole where it will take you down into it and also other people down into it.
Absolutely.
Right? It seems like the dark side or the darkness is something that if left untreated or left unacknowledged, or if you can't deal with it enough, then it brings you down and it brings other people down.
Absolutely. Part of my life as a physician, because I have a PhD in psychology in addition to my MD, is that I've worked as a therapist over the many years that I've been in practice, and I have dealt with a large number of depressed patients. And I've discovered that beneath the depression is great anger. And these people are good people. They're hurting. They're not bad. They're not clinically sick in the sense of the pathological medical model. They're normal human beings who have become depressed as the only compensatory way that they have been able to deal and then not be able to deal with a lot of woundedness down deep inside. And when I was able to get beyond the depression and get in touch with their anger and help them express that anger, they exploded in anger. And many religious, particularly Christian, when they get in touch with that anger, they feel great shame. And I have to help them see, your anger is nothing that you have to be ashamed of. The anger is not bad. The anger is an indication of a wound. And when I get in touch with why we're wounded, then one gets in touch with a whole lifetime of pain that people have gone through. And that's one of the great lessons that I have learned as a physician, that many people's woundedness and their anger and whatever other antisocial behavior that they have, and almost any addiction is a form, whether it's drug addiction or addiction to gambling or addiction to money or addiction to sex, or whatever the addiction may be, the addiction is not the problem. It becomes a social problem, but the addiction is not really, the addiction is a sign of woundedness beneath which is a great deal of pain. And until that pain is uncovered and the individual sees where that pain comes from, there's no way he's going to be able to come to grips with whatever his addiction is. So that's the dark stuff. And this is why the dark, the so-called antisocial stuff, is not all bad. It's usually dark because it's the other part of ourselves. And I think part of becoming a full human being is having the great courage, and it takes great courage to look inside and see stuff that you don't want anyone else to see. It takes great courage to be able to even speak your pain. And this is why a trusting relationship, which is what I think a real friendship is. You know, a real friend is someone who knows me and knows everything about me and loves me anyway. That's a rarity, okay? But to be able to say stuff that you're ashamed of because you think it's shameworthy, to be able to say that to another human being is the first step of healing. But it takes great courage and great integrity in the relationship to be able to take the chance. Because the last thing I want to do is tell you my dark side. For why? For fear that you won't love me anymore. You're gonna walk away from me. You're gonna say, oh my God, really? I never thought that about you. That's the last thing in the world that I can risk. And I am not going to take that risk until I'm absolutely certain that you can handle my dark stuff. I think that's why we don't. That's why we don't open up to other people. I think our facades, our personas, they're survival techniques we've learned over the years in order to survive. I want your love, but I can't risk losing your love if I tell you who I really am. And of course, who I really am is not the bad stuff. It's only one part of it. Part of who I am is the good stuff. It's the light and the dark. It's the sweet as well as the bitter. I'm all that. And I think we are so ashamed of ourselves because people have made us ashamed of themselves, ashamed of ourselves, that we go through life not ever wanting to take the chance for good reasons. Because I am pretty right about the fact that the guy who I call my friend or my boss or my ally or my school buddy, that he couldn't handle my stuff. And I'm not going to take the chance because I cannot afford to lose whatever little friendship I have with him.
Let's go back to the tit for tat. The before in your life when somebody did something to you, you could go and attack right back. But you've worked to remove that from your life as much as possible.
Let's say I work. Let's change that to the gerund. I'm working on that.
Working on it. Great. Some people would say embrace that primitive side. Somebody hits you in the face, you hit them right back. It's human. Why? How do you see that?
Oh, I understand that point of view. I think that's the natural, so-called normal point of view. Okay, that's who we are. If you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. Animals and humans are built that way. One can argue the goods or bads about that as long as one wants, but the point is that is reality. That's who we are. So it's silly to pretend that that's not who we are. It seems to me that if we continue on that path, the world will be unlivable. Relationships will be unsustainable. Life will not be worth living. I think where we are today in our world at large, in any part of the world that you and I can choose to point out, everything that makes up life as we know it today, the brutality of making it in the world. You know about that, I know about that. I think I have come to the conclusion that is not a life worth living. I have come to the conclusion that I recognize that given our natural tendencies toward violence, that therefore war is inevitable. But I hate war. I can't think of a war that ever solved anything. I really believe that force is unnecessary where skill is needed. Might does not make right. But I think that's the only tool in our toolbox. I think for some mysterious reason, our toolbox has one tool in it, a hammer. And so everything becomes a nail. So if you take out your hammer and hammer me, the only thing I'm going to do by nature is to hammer back at you. And the stronger man wins. Now, I think that's how we've lived our life. And I think history bears that out. I just think that that's not a life worth living. I recognize that I'm part of the problem, but I recognize also that I do not have to choose to continue to live my life that way. Not that I'm going to change the world at large. I don't think that's my task. My task is to stay in my lane and to do what I can to lead a non-violent, loving, compassionate life. I recognize I'm not going to change Ukraine. I'm not going to change the politics. But I don't, I'm not the savior of the world. I'm little old me. But little old me has a responsibility to do what little old me can, and what I can do is decide volitionally and consciously and purposely to choose not to live that way.
Mm.
I studied for years under a very famous psychiatrist, a Viennese psychiatrist by the name of Viktor Frankl. He's one of the heroes of my life, a Holocaust survivor whose book Man's Search for Meaning has changed the life of millions of people. And I studied under Victor. I was his personal physician, and I came to know him as a friend. One time he said to me, he said, George, we have no control over the things that happen to us, but we do have control over how we choose to respond to what happens. And I think that Viktor Frankl spoke truth. So I recognize that I live in a violent world. I can't change the violent world. It is what it is. I wish it weren't that way, but this is not utopia. And I'm not going to make this into utopia. I'm not God. I'm not the Savior. So absent a Savior, nothing's going to change. I recognize that. But the one thing I can do is that I can decide how I'm going to respond to the violence, lovelessness, and lack of compassion that comes to me. I have that much control over that. Infinitesimally small in my lane, but I think that's my obligation. For that I will be held responsible. So I'm pretty modest. I've learned to be modest. I think some of my arrogance has, thank God, seeped away. And I've become pretty modest in who I am and what my goals are and what I can do. I really believe that I've got to stay in my lane. And my lane's pretty small, but I think I've reached a time in my life where I can say, Ted, I'm content to be in my lane. And by content, I do not mean I'm retired and I can sit back. I don't mean that at all. I'm content with the context of my world to see I'm content with what I've been able to do, but I'm content with who I am and what I am and where I am. I'm also content with my task. I think I do have a task. My task is to be a certain kind of person. And it's not going to make a difference in the grander scheme of things, but that's not my business. My business is to attend to my lane, my task, and to at least fulfill that. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Jesus being the Son of God and him being on this earth with compassion and love and showing that and giving that to the people, does that guide you in a way?
Each one has his own role models and hope. I don't think we can live without hope or faith in something or someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for me, Jesus of Nazareth became the role model against which I compare myself and whom I want to follow. In recognition, clearly, I don't have any sense of hubris about who I'm going to become. I'm not going to become Jesus Christ, but I want to be a follower. So I recognize that I'm following, and as I follow, I recognize that in some way I'm becoming.
Mm-hmm.
How infinitesimally small that will be. So it seems to me, I really do believe, Ted, and I think you've hit upon a really fundamental point. It seems to me that each of us, whether we recognize it or not, chooses someone or something that we're going to model our life on. For some, it's success. For others, it may be drugs. For others, it may be some aspect of themselves. For some, it may be a noble cause. For me, as I mentioned earlier, for me in the early part of my life, it was being a doctor, and I don't want to gainsay that at all. But as I've grown older, I recognize that the models that I had, while sufficient for that time in my life, are not sufficient for me at this time in my life. And I really think there's a difference between the first half of life and the second half of life. The tools and the goals and the methodology that are necessary for the first half of life are not helpful in the second half of life. And I think many people who hobble in the second half of life never fulfill their tasks in the first half of life. You're 42, 43, I'm 87. Your goals and my goals are different. And it's really important that your goals don't become my goals, and my goals, it would be a big mistake for me to continue to make your goals my goals. You and I are at different times in life, and you absolutely need to fulfill your goals where you are. If you don't fulfill those goals, you'll drag those desires into the second half of life, and you'll contaminate the second half of life. So I'm totally for where you are. You need to do just exactly what you're doing. I did that, and I was able to close that chapter. Now I'm at a second time of life, second half of life, and for me, I've changed my goals. And so in terms of Jesus Christ and religion, following him has given me new goals and has redefined what I want to do with my life. So I think I've probably redefined love, and I've probably redefined compassion, and I think I'm in the process of kind of redefining my destiny, and I think your destiny is not my destiny, and my destiny is not your destiny. I think we each have our own, and I think our destinies change. They morph into other things as we grow. I feel very sorry. As you know, I live here in a retirement community, and it saddens me to see some of my friends and neighbors who are my age still fixating on the stocks and bonds. Now, there's nothing wrong with stocks and bonds. I'm all for it, okay? But when you're in your mid-80s and you're worrying about becoming a success in life, or you're in your mid-80s and you're worrying about your erection, I'm all for erection. I'm all for success. I'm all for money. But we've got something mixed up here. So for you to be content with your life at the age of 40 is something wrong with that. To be satisfied where you are is one thing. To be content with your life is another thing. You should be striving. That's appropriate for you. For me to be striving after goals for the first half of my life, is there something wrong with that? So I think I've become more religious in the kind of the non-theological sense of the word, and consequently, I think things like death and dying, eternity, life review, taking the long view of things, those are concepts which are more important to me, which could not have been and should not have been important when I was 35 or 40. And so I think where I am, I can say I am content. I couldn't have said that when I was 40, but I shouldn't have said that when I was 40. Mm. Does that make any sense what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we each have to, I think this ebb and flow is a journey that we're on, and there's nothing static about it. And I think that's beautiful. For me to try to be 40 is sad. For you to try to be 87 is sad. For you to want to be 40 physically, emotionally, intellectually, socially is absolutely appropriate. And if you don't fulfill your goals, you won't find contentment when you're an old man. That's just how it is.
With so many religions and beliefs, is there one true God, or how do we define God?
I guess that's really very subjective, isn't it? I guess the answer depends upon whom you ask. If you ask a Buddhist, he would say, there is no God. If you ask a Muslim, he would define God in a different way than if you were to ask a Christian, who would define God as a triune God. So if you ask a Jew would see God as a single God. So I think how one defines God depends upon what one's premises are. And the premises are based on how one conceptualizes it. And I do think this. I think that we all sooner or later find our way of structuring or concretizing or creating a tradition that makes sense to us. And by a tradition, I don't mean Protestant or Catholic. Those may be examples, but I'm talking about a way, for example, I think if one is an atheist, that's a person who is created a construct whereby a personal God doesn't have any purpose, meaning, or force. Another way for a deist, whether he's a Christian or however he expresses his deism, he sees that there is a force, and then what do we mean by force? For the Jew and for the Christian and for the Islam, these are Abrahamic traditions whereby the central force is one personal God. So for members of those three traditions, God is a God, a very personal God with whom one has a personal relationship. But if one is not part of that, if one's a Hindu, there are multiple gods. If one's a Sikh, if one is a Shinto, one has a relationship with the divine in a different way. So I think that the issue of the divine is a more generic way of looking at this. I think this fellow Brookson cited a little while ago of, use things, love people, and worship the divine. I think we all sooner or later worship a divine, whether we realize it or not. And so the divine for me is within the tradition of Christianity, and so I in my imagination, in my thinking, in my response, for me, the structure is the divine expressed in the personhood of Jesus Christ, whom I want to follow. That's my path. It wasn't Gandhi's path. One of my heroes is Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a great Jewish theologian who died a few years ago. Conservative Jew. As you know, there are 4 branches of Judaism: Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstruction. And Heschel was a great theologian within the conservative Jewish tradition, and he said many things which ring true for me. And so I'm one of those. For example, Heschel said one time, there is meaning beyond the absurd. That is a wonderful saying for me. It faces the fact that life is absurd. It's absurd that a 16-year-old girl goes out on a date, is hit by a drunk driver, she winds up in the emergency room, I take care of her and she dies. That's one in a million examples, but you know the examples that I do. It doesn't make any sense. That happens every day. The randomness of it. It's absurd. Life is absurd. What's going on in Ukraine is absurd. So he says, but there's meaning beyond the absurd. Now I think the only way that I can conceptualize that is to believe that there is a dimension, a cosmic purpose and meaning beyond the absurd that I do not understand, that I will never understand, that I, in my limited way, cannot even conceptualize. So, for me, the divine implies God, implies a meaning and a purpose. It also implies love, because I believe in the person of God. I believe that God loves me, that God is more than a force. Now, for many, God is a force, an anonymous, spiritual, invisible force, unattached from any personality attributes. So that's a deist, and there are many, many wonderful, wonderful people who are deists, but they're not Christians. Okay. So, as a Christian, I believe that, and I don't understand it, that God is a spirit, but God is also a personal God who knows me and loves me. Do I understand that? No, I guess I could make a theory out of that, but I'm not a theologian, and I'm not interested in theology in that sense of the word. But I do believe that. But at the same time, I understand and have fellowship with people who don't see it the way I do. So there was a time in my life when a divine was meaningless. It didn't play a role in my life. For the first 25 years of my life, it didn't mean anything. So I understand that. So I think that's just part of one's journeys.
Is there all of these gods that the names of these gods that you just described? For a Jain, it's this way. For a Buddhist, it's this way. Or for, a Jew or a Christian, or is it all the same God, just by different names? Or
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it is. I know many Christians, conservative Christians, whether they're Roman Catholic or Protestant, will disagree with me and will feel that I am really far to the left, heretical. But I think we are talking about truth and beauty and goodness. And so how that truth, beauty, and goodness manifests itself. I believe that truth, beauty, and goodness manifested itself in Moses, in the Hebrew Bible, in Abraham. I believe that truth, beauty, and goodness manifested itself in the Quran. I believe that truth, goodness, and beauty has manifested itself at certain specific, well-defined times throughout the history of mankind. I mean, we have men and women who somehow are enlightened, regardless of their tradition. They are enlightened. The Buddha was enlightened. Moses was enlightened. Isaiah and Jeremiah were enlightened. Muhammad was enlightened. Otherwise, how could he have written the Quran, except he somehow was given this as a conduit from God. So I do believe that there are men and women throughout history who have been given to us as beacons of light. And I think they speak in different tongues and have different aspects of that light. But I think light is light. Enlightenment is enlightenment. It may manifest itself at a certain time to a certain people. Somehow Muhammad spoke to the people of the Middle East. Jesus spoke to the people of the Middle East. The great thinkers in China, Confucius, and in Hindu, they spoke to different people at different times. So I think light manifests itself in strange, mysterious cultural ways for certain times, and I don't believe that God has spoken, that God will never speak again. I don't believe that. I think God is alive, and I think God speaks. I think the question is not whether God speaks, the question is, do I have ears to hear? And I think if I have ears to hear, I will hear things and see things in all sorts of so-called secular ways that I know it's God. I'm one of those who really believes that God can speak to us through all sorts of secular ways. I do not believe that church or the Bible is the only way that God speaks to me. This is why I need to be engaged with people, because God speaks to me through people. And so the Bible is probably the most important book in my library, but it's not the only book. And so, so that's why I need to be engaged with the world.
What else does God speak to you through?
Music.
Mm-hmm.
Through the seasons, through nature.
Mm-hmm.
God speaks to me through people. A word here or a word there. Yesterday I was reading an article in the New Yorker. I love the New Yorker. And it was in an article by a music critic on the Los Angeles Master Chorale, which is a wonderful, wonderful, world famous chorale in Los Angeles, world famous. And he was talking about the chorale, the beauty of the chorale, and he was talking about a particular piece that they were rehearsing. He attended the rehearsal, and he was describing how the rehearsal of the chorale was doing. And there was a sentence in there about the piece happened to be a religious piece, which I'd never heard of, by a Latvian or Scandinavian composer whom I know of but don't know well. And so the author of this article was talking about listening to how the chorale director was working with the chorale in trying to humanize this piece. So it was no longer a piece of music, but it was a spoken word to the heart. And it just hit me. It hit me like a bolt of lightning that I was having a religious moment. Completely unexpected, unasked for, unexpected. And I sat there and I stared at this paragraph in the article in the New Yorker, and I realized that God had spoken to me. Not bright lights, no Hollywood finale, and not that, but it was a reminder to me of how if I say yes to God and ask God to draw me closer to Him in the world, He will speak to me in all sorts of ways, like the New Yorker. And I'm not making a case for the New Yorker, you understand that. Nor Alex Ross, who wrote the article, is a wonderful music critic. Nor am I trying to plug the piece of music or the master chorale, but rather it became evident that in some incredible way, the director of the chorale was trying to get the chorale to get beyond the beauty. He was trying to have them say something that was beyond beautiful. It's like Bach. Bach is not beautiful, it's beyond Bach. And when you realize that Bach is saying something beyond Bach, then you're in another domain. And that's what hit me yesterday when I read this article. Just reading this article somehow put me, what he was trying to get the chorale to express, maybe that's the word, somehow those words expressed me. In other words, it wasn't the music I was hearing, because I don't know the music. I got what the composer wanted to say through the music. That was a God moment.
Did you have a physical something happening when that moment happened?
No.
The hair on the back of your neck stand up? Or?
Just speechless.
Yeah.
It was like for that moment it was beyond words. I tell you what I wanted to do. I really, and I don't want this to sound corny. I wanted to get on my knees and give thanks.
Mm.
Give thanks, not for the music, not for the chorale, but give thanks that I, for one split second, felt the presence of God in my life, and for that split second, that drew me closer to God in ways that I can't even understand. But I know that I was touched by. That's what I wanted to do, and it didn't last. I got on with my life for the rest of the evening. I did other things. I wasn't transfixed for the rest of the evening at all. But something happened inside me that reminded me of the fact that God is present in life. God is present in nature. He's there or she's there. All I have to do is be open to the fact that he or she can speak in all sorts of ways, which may be in the Bible, which may be in church, which may be in the synagogue, but maybe in the New York, or maybe standing on my balcony looking out on nature. This just reminds me that God is alive. The question is, am I?
Mm. Mm.
So that has kind of taken me out of church. It's taken me out of theology. It's brought me into a dimension of life which is, I think, probably more akin to faith than anything else. It's hard to describe it, but I know it to be real for me. This is back to first person singular. And what's real for me, I'm not saying should be real for anyone else. But if someone asked me about who I am and where I am, I would tell them if I thought they were sincere.